Here we go, recording. So thank you so much for the beautiful reactions to Coppel, Bon, and Mara, and the wisdoms that came out of our audience as it touched their hearts and you let it into your souls, the power of a story. And one of those was from Vince. Vince is from the storytelling group called The Gab, and I love The Gab in Cork. And they were responsible for me telling my first story, not as a drama therapist, but as an actual storyteller. So I dedicate this one to The Gab and to all my lovely colleagues in that storytelling club. And it's about a woman of the knowing. And Vince has just told us there about the man of the knowing. Moira ní Vicra came to live in the village of Knocknagree in the middle of the night. Knocknagree is in the middle of the Sliabh Luachra region. It has such beautiful music and stories and tradition. And Moira settled there with her daughter, Saoirse. Saoirse meaning freedom, and she was a free spirit. Moira would be called when somebody couldn't afford a doctor or an apothecary or didn't want to let the priest know the ailment that they had. Then she would come. She would come with her soft touch, putting heat back into the arthritis. She would come with her magical teas of nettle and dandelion, knowing exactly how to mix them to make the person feel better. One of the people that she came to often was Shan Sean. Shan Sean lived in the village and was a well-known musician. His son was Sean, and his grandson, Sean Og, lived in his small cottage with him. They were so known for the music. Sean would take the bow down from over the fireplace and he'd start a conversation, la 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 la, and his grandson would finish it, la 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 la. And when people were passing that cottage and they'd hear the music, sure, they'd wander in and they'd have a beautiful session, the likes of which we had in the Kerry Museum last night, when all the people wandered in from Cork and all over Kerry, and even from Canada, from St. John's. And so it was that life was going on until Sean was getting older and was in the need of Moira's help. She never failed to come. She kept him playing that fiddle right up to the point where he left the smartle coil and went to meet his maker. Oh, what a lonesome winter that was for Sean Og. He'd sit in his own chair and he'd look over at his grandfather's empty chair and he'd look up over the fireplace at the two bows crossed. And he didn't have the heart to play music. He hardly had the heart to eat. And the hearth of the fire and his own heart remained empty during that winter. But then life has a way of inviting us back in if only we listen. And in the spring, he began to hear the birds singing to him in the morning. They'd sing. And in the evening, they'd invite him out for the session. And after a while, he went. At first, he played the really sad tunes. La 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 la. And one day, he felt somebody watching him from way back there. You know, when somebody is looking at the back of your head, and he really didn't want to turn around. He was thinking to himself, oh my God, what is it? Is it an animal keeping an eye on me? Is it my grandfather coming back to listen how I'm doing with the music? Who is looking at me, he said. But he couldn't stop himself from turning and looking up the hill. And do you know who was there? Do you know who was looking down the hill at him? Saoirse ní Vicra, with laughter in her eyes. She waved at him, and he took up the bow again and played. Night after night he played tune. Night after night she slowly came down the hill, until the night came when she was sitting beside him. She looked into his face and he looked into hers. And when their eyes met, they knew, they knew that they wanted to spend the rest of their lives together. Oh my goodness. Now he would have to ask for permission from Moira Ní Vicora, the woman with the knowing, to walk his daughter out. Sure, as soon as he set foot on her land, she knew he was coming. He was dressed in his grandfather's old suit, the collar of the shirt way too big for him, but he was after pulling the tie tight. When he knocked on the door, Moira opened it. "Hello," she said, as if she didn't know why he was there. "And how can I help you today?" "Well," he said, "God bless all here. It's lovely to be here. Oh, the smell of baking is gorgeous. Oh, you were so good to my grandfather. God bless all here. Did I say that already?" he said. "I was wondering if I could walk your daughter out." It took everything in her not to smile, not to clap her hands, for she knew that this would be a good match. But she knew that he must earn her. So she looked at him with her arms crossed and she said, "Mm-hmm. And what makes you think that you're ready to walk a girl out?" "I've the cottage," he said. "I've a small holding and I have a few chickens and I've 2 goats. And when I've enough money, I'm going to buy a cow and I'll be able to feed a family." All of this gave hope to her heart, but still she persisted. "Yes," she said, "but do you know the 3 nourishments of the road?" "What are the 3 nourishments of the road?" "Three nourishments of the road. The 3 nourishments of the road." He was going back through all the stories he's ever heard, but he couldn't think of one that had the 3 nourishments of the road in it. "My God," he said, "I don't know, but I will know. I'm going to take to the road and find out." And then her heart really lifted. And with his next sentence, she became very fond of him. "Moira, I'm going to go into Cork on the butter roads. Is there anything you'd like me to bring in for you?" "I've a firkin of butter," she said. "Would you bring that in on the handcart?" A firkin is 100 weight, and he was young and strong, and he agreed. So she put the firkin of butter up on top of the handcart for him, and off he went. He was going down the road when he started hearing his name being called. "Sean Oak, Sean Oak, Sean Oak." And he turned around, and there was Saoirse running with the prata leather foca with the potato for his pocket, all warm and lovely after she had just boiled it. "Prata leather foca," she said, "a potato for your pocket." And he put it into his pocket and it warmed him immediately. "Now," she said, "don't eat that all on your own. Make sure that you share that food with someone." And he thought to himself, does she know what a young man eats? Sure, that would be gone in one swallow. But Saoirse was to be his wife. So he thought he'd take it on board and he promised her that he wouldn't eat it unless somebody else was there with him to share it. Off he went down the road with the firkin of butter out in front of him, his fiddle on his back, and happiness in his heart. And he was able to go for a long time like that. But after a while, his stomach started to make itself known. Oh, he patted the potato and he thought about it. But then he thought about his promise to Saoirse and he thought he must abide by that. He didn't have to wait long until, do you remember the old Bisto ad when a steam finger would come along and it would tickle you under the nose and it would pull you to the dinner table? Well, it was kind of like that. A beautiful steamy smell came across the breeze. Oh, there was eating and drinking in the smell alone. He could smell lavender and a bit of mate, and there was something else, something nice and heavy. Was it potatoes or pearl barley? He wasn't sure. Well, it galvanized him. He ran towards that smell, and there was a woman there with her shawl, and she had it crossed, and she said, "And how might I, mate, help you?" And he said, "What's in the pot?" And she said, "What have you to offer to the pot?" And he said, "Oh," and wasn't he glad then that he had the prata leather foca? Out he took it from his pocket, and plop, into the pot it went, and he could feel it sinking into the beautiful stew that was bubbling. And in return, he got the bowl of 3 days stew, the nicest stew you've ever tasted in your life. There was bits of meat in it. There was pearl barley that was fat and luscious. There was the odd spud. There was carrots. All of this had been gathered wild along the road by the people that were walking on the butter road. And the taste of it, it tasted like the community of people that had gathered it, rich and nourishing. And as he spooned it into his hungry mouth, he thought to himself, oh, that's the first nourishment of the road. The beautiful food that's available to everyone if only you know where to look. He said, clapping his hands. And as he did, the people said, what's going on? And he was telling them his story. And they said, do you think the second nourishment might be this? Or do you think the second nourishment might be that? And he listened to everything and he thought, yeah, they're all good things, but I don't think they're the nourishments of the road. And he slept that night, a great deep sleep, under a hedge with other bodies doing the same thing. And in the morning, he got up and he picked up his handcart with the firkin of butter on it, and he started to head down the road. It was downhill for the longest time. But as evening was drawing in, the road began to rise uphill once more, and his legs were tired, and his heart was tired, and his spirit was tired. Oh, it was hard to push that firkin of butter up that hill until, on the strains of the wind, he could hear music. And it got louder as he ran towards it until he was right in the middle of it, and people dancing on the crossroads and the joy hopping out of their eyes. And he was pulling the bow out from his backpack and putting the fiddle to his chin, and he said, can I join the session? Can I join the session? And they looked at him and they said, do you think you can play? Do you think you can play? And he kind of took a bit of a start, and then they laughed and they said, of course you can join in. Sit in there at the end. And he sat in, and as soon as he started to play, one of the old men said, wait a minute, are you anything to Sean? He might be known as Shan Sean now. And he said, Shan Sean is my grandfather. Oh yeah, he says, you have the look of him, all right. You're the pure stamp of him. And he said, you've the thumbprint of his music. And he was so delighted to hear that, to hear this man speaking of his grandfather like that. And he heard stories of his grandfather when he was a young boy, a different boy with no cares, how full of taspy he was, how full of music, how full of the crack clink of his kjol. Oh, what a joy it was to hear these stories of his grandfather. And he knew that this was the second nourishment of the road, the great Irish session that everybody can join in, where everyone is welcome, where you have a bit of everything, music and stories and singing and memories. Oh yes, he knew what the second nourishment of the road was, and he took off once more with his handcart, his heart lighter now, his legs lighter, and he could see in the distance the spirals of the churches of Cork City, and he knew that he was heading towards Shandon Street and the Butter Market and the firkin crane that would lift this weight from his handcart, and he would have to carry it no more. And he asked everybody, he turned to everybody that he met, do you know what the nourishment of the road is? Do you know what the third nourishment is? Oh, I need to know the third nourishment of the road. But he landed in Cork City and in Shandon Street with all the millions of people there. Nobody was able to tell him what the third nourishment of the road was. But they did take his firkin of butter, and they gave him a good price. And he sold it into his vest because that's what people did in those days to keep their money safe. And then he went back down the road again, asking everybody, do you know what the third nourishment of the road is? The journey back was much faster because he no longer had the weight. And he arrived into Knocknagree in the early hours of the morning, at the darkest part where morning and night meet. And his heart was heavy, and he was thinking he'd failed. And then he saw a little candle in his mother's window, and he could smell the apple tart, for she was waiting up for him, like most Irish mammies when their sons are abroad. And he went in and he said, Ma'am, and he told her everything I've told you. And he said, I don't know what the third nourishment of the road is. And she crossed her hands and she threw her eyes up to heaven and she said, am I rearing Egypts? What do you mean, Mom? He said. She says, you don't know what the third nourishment of the road is. No, he said, do you know what the third nourishment of the road is? She said, did you bend the ear of every person that would listen to you? I did, ma'am, and not one of them knew what the third nourishment of the road is. Do you know? She said, did you stand shoulder to shoulder with people all the way into Shandon? I did, ma'am. Did they listen to you? Did they add their tuppence worth of advice? Did they take your problem on? They did, ma'am, they did. They did. What's the third nourishment of the road, ma'am? She looked at him and she said, you still don't know what the third nourishment of the road is? Ma'am, please just tell me, he said. She says, it's the fine people of Ireland, our tribe, the people that listened to you on the way in, the people that tried to help you, the people that always help us in our times of trouble. That's the third nourishment of the road. And then she put her two fingers out, you know that how mammies do, because as he ran past her, she stuck her two fingers into the back of his shirt and she pulled him back. And she says, where do you think you're going now? He said, up to Morning Vicar to claim Saoirse's hand. Indeed, you're not, she said, or there'll be a divorce before there's a marriage. Sit down there now, she says, and you wait until 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. Of course, Maureen Vicar was looking deep into her pot as she stirred it, and she thought to herself, I'll have to wait too until 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. They say that wedding was the happiest, longest wedding that Knocknagree ever saw. It lasted for 3 days, and the descendants of Saoirse and Sean E. Vicar are still there with their beautiful Sliabh Luachra music. So I'm just going to unmute. So you can unmute yourselves there and let me know what you thought of that story. So that was a story that I wrote because of the butter roads of Cork City and the history of walking them into existence. They were walked into existence by our ancestors. So did you like that story?
Yes.
Okay. So thank you so much. It's so nice to see the lovely faces, and I just want to give people a sense of, you know, kind of what's coming back, because it's very, when you're looking back at the stories, it's very easy to think the storyteller was there on their own. You know, so it's really lovely to have you in the shot as well. So,
Marie?
yeah.
So I ran downstairs and I missed a small part, but I ran downstairs to pick up this necklace.
Oh,
because last night you talked about your labradorite, and
yeah.
I have this necklace, and in the middle is a piece of granite from Ailsa Craig.
Yeah, oh my goodness.
Yeah, and so, you know, I think it was Francis was saying about the giants going back and forth.
Yeah.
So I'll very, very quickly tell you, there's a little story from George Macpherson on Skye that talks about a giantess that uses Ailsa Craig as a stepping stone.
Yeah.
But she's devastates, you know, Kintyre and Antrim, and eventually, you know, Finn McCool is asked to help and he can't sort it, and then the fairies are asked, so they get everyone to make firkins of butter and, you know, churn it up and then put it along the coasts. And then the fairies come, you know, that night, and they smear the butter on Ailsa Craig. So when the giantess steps on the rock, she slides off and sinks to the bottom of the sea. And so she's still at the bottom of the sea. So her belly is Isla, and her breasts are the paps of Dura, and her chin is Scarpa.
Oh my goodness. I love when you tell a story and these little gems come back and forth. It's one of the nicest pieces of being at the sessions. So the sessions of storytellings are so nourishing. Thank you, Claire, for that one, you know. So has anybody anything else to add, or will I go to my next story? So I see Michelle. So Michelle, you can unmute there, and I see the lovely Noreen Lynch, and you can unmute. You can unmute
I
yourself.
was only going to tell you we can't unmute ourselves, but we can.
Oh,
now.
you can't. Yeah, you can't while I'm telling a story, but then afterwards you can. So yeah, so lovely to see all your lovely.
Can I just say something, Maria? It's just about your other story. The couple.
Couplepon O'Hara.
Yeah, just the language is just beautiful, and I just the line when he was unhappy and she caught the ache in his heart as it leapt into his eyes.
Oh,
I just thought that was just amazing. That's just
yeah.
you know, and even the language also with the last story, it's just so evocative, and
Oh,
you know, it's like it even goes back to what you were saying yesterday about the you know in the 6-part workshop and
yeah.
about getting up in the morning and the shower and how you describe things. So even just that, like that he was, you know, she knew he was unhappy and she caught the ache as it leapt into his eyes. It just blew me away.
That's it. There was a beautiful tutor that I had in Maynooth. Her name was Angela Bracken when I was studying to be a drama therapist. And she said, if you see the story on your internal projector, you will never again struggle for language, you know.
Yes.
Oh, I see the story. And as I see the story unfolding, I'm telling it, you know. So there is a difference between the conversation with you have and how you tell a story because of that, because of the internal projector. Thank you for that beautiful observation, Michelle.
Amazing. Thank you, Maria.
You know, okay, so I'm just going to stop the recording.